Cool. Looks like we are live. There's some folks trickling in down at the bottom. So as always, we'll give it a few minutes and let some folks tune in before we kick things off officially. But exciting times in application season world, I guess, for some people. New Mexico just came out. I know Montana just came out the other day. So I know there's a lot of people really excited, and there's some people, if you're like me, that had a lot of red when you checked New Mexico anyways.
Yeah. Unsuccessful.
Yep. But yep. What's coming down the pike for next draws as far as results coming out?
Man, results coming out's a tricky one because they're all kind of staggered in there. I mean, Colorado's releasing results too. I think the sheep, moose, and goat is released. Then they'll start trickling out the elk, deer, and antelope after that. I mean, we got the Utah deadline coming up here shortly. And if you're a Kansas applicant, that's coming up.
Kentucky, you name it.
Yeah.
Montana, moose, sheep, goat.
Yep.
So, but results coming out, I think that's probably the next one is Colorado. It's going to trickle out the elk, deer, and antelope.
Which is a big one. It's the most interest that we have as a group of licensed application clients is in the state of Colorado.
For sure.
And probably rightfully so.
Yep. Yeah, they have most of the opportunity, or a lot of opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So is that mostly, I'm sure, non-residents interested in hunting Colorado?
Yeah, I shouldn't say all. The vast majority of that piece of data is non-residents for sure.
Yeah.
It's just such a easy transition for most non-residents because you get the guys coming from the Midwest. That's the first state they get to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not too far from guys in California and Idaho and stuff in Washington to get over in there.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, cool. Appreciate everybody, you guys at Huntful, and then everybody that tuned in. Appreciate the time tonight, and I'm excited to as always learn some more from you guys. A couple quick reminders and just housekeeping stuff, and then we can kick it over to you guys and dive in. As it says on your screen there, you guys are on mute, so we cannot hear you. We can't see you, so don't worry about that. We get a bunch of questions about that. Go ahead and use the chat function at the bottom. Let us know where you're tuning in from. But if you have a question that you want any of us to answer at the end of the presentation, make sure that you're dropping it in the actual Q&A down at the bottom and not using the chat for that. A couple more things. If you do have account information or map questions or anything of that nature, go ahead and email us at help@onxmaps.com. It'll just be a better, more efficient way to get your guys' questions answered and get you guys all squared away that way. And then finally, if you're watching this after it's live or listening to it in a podcast after it's live, unfortunately, you cannot win the giveaway. So if you email us and ask about it, that's the answer. So April 17th is the date today. So if it's after live, the giveaway is already closed. You do have to be present in order to get entered in for that. So with that being said, I'll kind of kick it over to you guys if you want to do a brief introduction and then jam through the slides.
Perfect. Garth, you want to kick us off?
So Garth Jansen, this is awesome. I mean, I love doing these webinars. It's fun to kind of go through and dive in on a broader scale to help people out. But I've been in here with Huntin for about 10 years. It's been an amazing place to be for that 10 years. Get to basically do what I love for a living, which can't complain about that. But yeah, basically day to day doing this, helping people figure it out.
Have you seen any change during that time in the draw systems, Garth?
That much.
A ton, yeah. Jared Lyle here with Huntin Fool as well. I've been here 8 years. Again, feel privileged to share this time in the evening with those of you who want to tune in. I guess tonight's goal in my mind is to inspire you to get off the couch, burn some points, and or try to draw some tags that may not require points and go make memories and not just kind of acquire points to the balance sheet. It's kind of a scary thing to do. Some of what we're going to talk about today is going to sound counterintuitive to that because we're going to tell you about all these systems where you got to kind of build and build and build. But at the end of the day, we really want you to get out in the field and make memories. So that's our goal. That said, we'll dive right in here. Well, maybe. Technical difficulties. They won't last long. Oop.
There we
All
go.
right, we're gonna kick off with a few questions. Garth?
So this is kind of a basic rundown of what we usually tell people. These are some things that, questions we get, questions you got to ask yourself, like, what do you want to do? When we look at some of these questions on here, cash in on my points, so basically we get that a lot this time of year. Like, when's the best time to jump into the draw? I have X amount of points. When should I go in? That's something to always consider when you're looking at it. Obviously, future potential changes. We'll dive into that slide and we'll kind of go through. But these are all kind of bullet points that we're going to talk about through this slideshow. But this is just basically giving you a rundown of pretty much what we do on a daily basis, going through consultations and talk to guys.
Yeah, and I've got a really good, relevant example. A good friend of mine texted me and said, hey, I've got this opportunity. He has 5 elk points in Colorado. He's got an opportunity to go on a private land hunt that, quite frankly, is going to produce better results than his 5 points could buy him on public land. And he's like, but this private land hunt is 0 points. He's like, am I just wasting these 5 points to go on this hunt? And I was like, absolutely not. At the end of the day, the points do not always equate into inches of antler. We'll talk about that more later, but that's a great case in point.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Okay, we've gone through a lot of this stuff before. I will try to go through it fairly quickly. Again, this will be on YouTube later, so you're welcome to pause this, digest it in slower chunks. But basically, we talk about draw systems from 4 primary points of view: random draws, bonus point draws, preference point draws, and blended draws. We sometimes refer to those as hybrid as well, but random draws are exactly what you'd expect them to be. Everyone goes into the hat equally. Doesn't matter how many years you've applied for the tag, you still go in with 0 essentially, or 1 chance in the hat like everybody else. I won't go through all the states that do that. Bonus point draws are actually also a random draw as well, except you have extra chances. So the more points you build, the more names of yourself you get in the hat. And then finally, preference point draws, really good phrase for describing this, is a top-down permit award system. So if you have the maximum amount of points, you will get a tag. If you don't have enough points, you will not get a tag.
Yep.
Period. And then there's a hybrid of that, or blended draws, Garth.
Yeah, and the blended draws, a lot of these are just kind of piggyback. So most of what you see here is they will have some sort of a preference draw. And on the other end of that, they'll have some random draws. And like, case in point, you get to Arizona, like they have 20% of those is based off a preference draw. The rest of the tags are then issued in a random draw, the 80%. But in that random draw for Arizona, for instance, you get extra chances in that random draw. So they act as bonus points at that stage. But when you get to Wyoming, for instance, they have 75% that will go in that preference draw. Like, most of the tags will go in the preference draw. When you get to the 25% that go random, they strip everybody of all their points and you're in 1 time. So it's a true random draw. So you have different dynamics for those different states, depending on what state performs what and where they get into. But like Colorado, for instance, you see that up there where a preference point draw, it says elk, deer, and antelope. And then you see down there elk, deer, and antelope. Well, they have 2 different draw systems. Those are non-high demand tags up there in the preference point draw. These are high demand tags down there, and they have what they call a hybrid. So that will offer mostly residents the opportunity to draw those tags.
Right.
But you get the gist of it. Like, it's you have both when it comes to those blended draws. It sounds a little confusing, but once you get the nuances down, the only differences is really between state to state how they handle it.
Yep. And I think the takeaway again would be, if you're talking about a preference point draw, which I'm kind of circling here with the cursor, again, we're all aware if you don't have enough points, you're not going to get a tag, period. So that one is not as critical. But if you go into a blended draw or a bonus or a random draw, we constantly tell people, don't apply for points only. Please, for the love of everything, try to draw a tag. Even if you swing for the fence, down here in these blended draws, again, you see there's random tags being allocated throughout that entire list. Don't sit on the sidelines building points.
Yeah, and like Wyoming, that's the only one that when I have a conversation with someone, depending on their financial situation, I might tell them to put in for points, just because there is an extra cost. If you put in, you have to front the entire tag fee if you put in for that, versus if you build points, it only costs you a point fee. So
You'd say that's true for specifically elk,
Wyoming.
deer, and antelope in
Yeah.
Wyoming.
For sure.
Most,
Yeah.
to be specific.
And when it comes to like Arizona and Utah, by all means, put in for that draw because it costs you the same amount regardless, even if you swing for the fence.
Yep. Okay. All right. We will not spend much time on this slide. What I want to illustrate here, if you look at Colorado, Iowa, and Kansas in this group right here, they do not average your points or share your points in any way, shape, or form. I've been hoping that somewhere down the road, Colorado will change that. There has been a slight amount of buzz about it. I'm not holding on to my hope for it, but I've got over 20 points in Colorado for a couple species. I've always wanted to take my kids hunting, as opposed to hanging on to getting a slightly better tag because I have 20 points. But the point is, pay attention to the way the draw works. We often have people that go in as a group. They assume that their points are going to be averaged. That's not true in every single state. Speaking of which, there's also a risk of losing your points in some states. So Montana is the outlier here. You're going to notice that they're up here in the 1 year purge. They're also ironically down here in the never purge. Thank you, Montana, for being complicated. We'll try to keep it simple. The 1 year purge has to do with preference points. Again, top-down draw system, where you're just trying to get your combination license, which is an opportunity to hunt deer or elk or both in the state of Montana. Whereas the bonus points for the limited entry tags in Montana, the special units to draw for elk or deer, etc., those never purge. So again, pay attention to these things. You get caught in a point trap like Nevada and Wyoming, 2 years in, the third year you don't apply, your points are gone.
Yeah, they're out.
You don't get them back.
I would say as an addition, keep track year to year because this does change. Montana used to purge bonus points because mine got purged right out of high school. I didn't apply for, I think, 3 consecutive years for a couple, and they all went to 0. So they are subject to change. Don't just look at this and say, okay, this is the way it is. It's the way it's going to be. I've learned the hard way on that. So just every year, constantly be checking that.
Absolutely. Oregon's another great example, Dylan. Same thing. I lost all my Oregon points because I kind of threw the towel in. I'm like, too expensive. All my points got purged. Now Oregon never purges points. So had I stuck in there just a little bit longer, it would have been worth it, honestly. So great point. All right, moving along.
So basically, this screenshot right here, what we always tell guys is when you look at your points and how to look at those draw odds going into this year's draw, always remember when you're looking at the draw odds, as we see here on top right, you've got last year's point totals. So if I'm looking at, let's say, unit 22, and I'm looking at that, now we picked Wyoming, a little bit confusing because there's a regular and a special. But the main takeaway is if I'm looking at the minimum points to draw, unit 22 and the special, it says 50% at 17 points. What I always say is you can assume that 50% of those guys will now be going into that draw next year with 18 points. So you're no longer guaranteed at 18 points the way you were in this year's draw. So always look and say, okay, how many points did I have last year when the draw took place? And then you can make a better assessment of how it's going to look this year. Like 58, for example, in the regular draw says 100% at 17. I mean, I can relatively assume, unless people jump around and into that, 100% of the people drew out at 17. So that cleared out that point level. So if I was going into it with 16 last year and didn't get the tag and now I have 17, I should have a relatively good shot at drawing that tag. Maybe not guaranteed, but
you should be in the fight.
But I should be in there. Yeah. So it's a good thing to look at when you're looking at the point totals. Remember, it's just a snapshot of last year's draws. So just remember how many points you had going into that year's draws, and that should give you a better idea of exactly where you sit for this year.
Yeah, the habit is to look at this year's points in your portfolio and last year's draw odds and combine the two, and you can't do that. You have to look a year in the past, or as this says, a snapshot in the past.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. All right.
So on this one, when we talk about don't want to waste my points, like that's something we get a lot. And when we're talking about wasting points, I think Jared touched on it briefly earlier. it's not a waste of your points if you're accomplishing the goal that you have in place for those points.
Right.
And what I like to say is points don't equal, like if you have 20 something points in a state, that's not going to equal inches. That doesn't mean that hunt, I mean, it's going to probably be a better hunt, but as we go through this, you'll understand that different states make changes, and you started building those points 20 years ago. Well, that state might look a lot different now than when you started. So if you can draw a tag now, regardless of the amount of points it takes, because realistically, points gives you options. It doesn't mean you have to maximize it. If you have 8 points and by hell, that thing took 7 last year, I'm not going to apply for it because I'm wasting a point. Like if you're going to get like your friend on that private land hunt, he had to put in his first choice and he's burning his points, but he was getting what he wanted.
He's getting a way better hunt than he could get public land for the same amount of points.
Yeah. So don't look at it as a waste of points. Look at it as I have X amount of points. What are my options for those points? Even if it's 5 for 1 point or 5 for, or look at a 15-point hunt and you got 22.
Yep.
Like that hunt right there with my daughter, that was a hunt that she got lucky in during the secondary draw. That was in a unit that took, I think it was 17 points to draw that tag. I talked to multiple non-resident hunters that had 18 to 20 points on that hunt. Arguably, they're a little disappointed in quality. But again, like Colorado, those guys started building in the golden years.
Yeah.
And had they been cashing in those points and drawing
They would have had
tags,
3 or 4 amazing hunts
the 1 point
on
units,
3 to 4 points at a time.
The 1 point units that they were hunting back then arguably had better quality and were better hunts than the hunts they were on with 22.
Yep.
So again, just
and to be honest, I don't think that any of us here at Huntin' Fool would side on the side of the game and fish agencies moving toward better trophy quality again. Generally speaking, they're prioritizing opportunity, which we happen to agree with for the most part. They're prioritizing opportunity over trophy. So we see this, the points are going like this and the quality is going like this.
Yeah.
So it's more important than ever to like look at it and go, hey, is it time for me to go on a hunt?
Yeah.
And we'll talk more about that later. There's some other like state game and fish agency changes in general that also put this in jeopardy.
Yeah. So bottom line, don't look at your points as a waste if you have more points than the actual hunt you're putting in for. If it accomplishes what you're after, send it.
Yeah, we hear the term waste and leaving points on the table a lot. Neither's true.
Yeah.
All right. A good case in point here. I'm going to jump to the middle bullet point in this little list where it says hunt the year, not the unit. This is a current graph of moisture throughout the Southwest. And moisture, it's a big buzzword that occasionally is overstated. But when you start talking about the area that we're looking at here, it almost can't be overstated.
No.
Drought kills antler growth, kills deer, kills elk. It just does not go well. We've looked at a couple good years in a row. You're looking at a lot of this ground down here that's at least at 100% of normal moisture, and a lot of it's pushing close to 200. Nevada's a good example. I mean, what was the buck that was killed this last year? 280?
283, I think.
Yeah.
Like,
and for a while, Nevada's quality was going downhill, but we had a good moisture year last year and another one on deck this year. And last year, one good year, we see a 280 plus buck kill.
I think it was the biggest buck that had been shot in 30 years.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying there was a 30-year drought in Nevada.
No.
But you can see the
there is a correlation.
Yes. You can see the impact it has.
Yep. There's a correlation. So pay attention to that. Again, hunt the year, not the unit necessarily. And we do see extreme point jumps in the draw to obtain permits on wet years. You see it all the time.
Oh, Arizona elk for sure.
Big time.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
So
all you.
This nice little snapshot of that beautiful, majestic animal that's being released out of that cage, that is something that can come into play when you start talking big game hunt numbers. And as we've seen in other states, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, that can impact what you thought you had. Like there's other things like weather that definitely wreak havoc. Like in Wyoming, gosh dang, we've
had 2 really bad winters.
It's just damn near wiped out some of that stuff in Wyoming and Idaho. And they put those deer and antelope in a pretty poor position. But these are all things that can happen and really out of our control. I mean, the wolf release is obviously within the game and fish control, but us as hunters have zero control over that, and we just have to roll with the punches. But those are some things to think about when you start looking at it and saying, okay, should I cash in my punch? Should I go hunting now? Should I wait until things get better? We're seeing it all across the West now when it comes to CWD. It's kind of a buzzword. It's on the foremost of most game and fish's minds when they're talking about management and
you
herd numbers.
You can't open a set of regulations that doesn't have a big glaring CWD call out.
Oh, bold lettering. And
Yeah.
that's the one thing where they can go in and pretty much manipulate and add seasons, add tags, do whatever they want. That's why we call it the trump card, because you can't argue with them. You can't argue with the reason they're doing it. Like Colorado.
Doesn't matter how many points you have.
Oh, no, it doesn't. I mean, Colorado has pretty much molded their entire deer structure over the last 5 years for CWD, just to get rid of a lot of the troublemaking mature bucks that are out there spreading that disease to everybody, killing the deer. But that is the one thing we just want to make sure that you are aware of is these are the types of things that can impact your hunting future, the changes in these different states. So everything
we
always
tend to
changes.
look at it from like kind of just a trophy and quality of hunt opportunity. But that's what we're trying to say here is that the weather can make a huge difference. Wildlife policies can make a huge difference. And you have to kind of, unfortunately, anticipate some of those because again, they can make that call tomorrow and it's all gone. So again, that's why we don't want you just to throw your points away, but we do know that this is going a direction that you should be trying to make memories, not collect points.
For sure. And this is the bad.
Yep.
We're about to get to the good.
Well, this one's not so good to start with. So let's move into some state by state information. In Wyoming, there is a quote unquote preference points for Rocky Mountain sheep and Shiras moose. Important to note that it's in quotes for a reason. If you don't have enough preference points, again, remember that a preference draw is a top-down strategy. If you don't have enough points, you're not in the draw, period. There will be no random sheep licenses this year, which means if you don't have enough points and you're participating in this $150 a year for your preference point, etc., it's just a donation to conservation. They did just announce a moose tag, a random moose tag. So there will be a random moose tag in Wyoming this year. So you can have a chance, but for Rocky Mountain sheep, no such luck.
Unless you're max, which I think is what, 24-ish?
Yeah, you have to be so deep invested into it. Yeah. So anyway, and this is a change that has gone the wrong direction in the last couple of years, made it more limited for non-residents and reduced the amount of licenses available. So again, this is a classic example. We have members, lots and lots of members who had enough preference points to draw a sheep tag at one point in time. And Wyoming has pulled that away from them by moving the needle and changing the allocation from what it used to be in terms of the percentage of non-resident to residents. You got to be aware of that. We've got so many members who are heartbroken. Like, dude, I've been paying $100 a year plus for preference points for as long as they can remember, only to have it completely pulled away from them, potentially forever.
Yep.
Same is true in Wyoming. It is a true preference point for elk, deer, and antelope. Again, it's in quotes for reason above, but here, like Garth mentioned earlier, 75% of the tags are going to go to people with the most points, 25% go random. And then, of course, you see also things like increased pricing.
Yeah, no, that's going to change the game this year for sure. I mean, wouldn't you agree that with that huge increase, I mean, it's $2,000 by the time you get done paying all your fees, it's over $2,000 for that elk license. You're over $1,200. I got to say, people were on the fence paying, $700 or $800 for an antelope license before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to tell you, it's going to get rougher in the regular draw for antelope.
Yeah.
And deer too. But that's definitely a big change this year that's just kind of going to sneak up.
Yeah, and these are the other reasons to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's, again, the point. I'll talk about the top end of Colorado here for Rocky sheep, Shiras moose, and mountain goat. They do have a weighted point system where those weighted points act like a bonus point. It's $100 a year. Should you purchase it or not? We're of the opinion you should not. Get your 3 points. You have to have 3 in order to go into the draw. So You're going to swallow the pill for 3 years. In fact, it's a true donation for the first 3 years.
Yeah.
So swallow the pill, get to your 3, and then honestly, the bonus points, the weighted points, don't make enough difference if you actually study the top rut draw odds, the draw odds available from Huntin Fool as well. They don't move the needle far enough to justify it. I'm at 15 sheep points, 3 plus 12, and I didn't buy a sheep point this year.
I was going to ask if you bought it, because most people,
There's no point.
they get invested and they're like,
It's not worth
if
it.
I get one more, but we've done the numbers.
Yeah. It's such an incremental adjustment. It's not worth it. And then of course, actual preference points for elk, deer, and antelope. It's currently 100% preference draw, as we alluded to earlier, and it's definitely worth participating in the preference points for that. So again, we're just looking at the species and trying to understand, should you or should you not spend your hard-earned money?
Yeah. And where we have that, in there for low demand hunts on that non-resident quota change, basically that's because we talked about the hybrid draw earlier, where there was random tags available, but those always go to residents because the quota is always filled for the non-residents by the time they get to that. Outside of antelope, you see a couple tags here and there for antelope. It'll go to non-residents, that hybrid, but almost, I'd say 90% of the hunts fall within that low demand. And that's 75-25. And the tough thing is, they're going through a committee right now trying to figure out what they need to change on this. They're currently under the 5-year season structure, figuring out how they're going to do the next 5 years and how that season structure is going to look. They're balancing that along with, they put a draw committee together. Basically, because I think what's happening is they're losing a little interest with that preference.
Shocker.
Yeah. So they're doing similar things in that other states have already done. They're looking, how can we attract people or keep people interested in this state where it's 100% preference draw, and they're looking at the best unit in the state and they're saying, I'm never getting there. I'm never going to draw that tag in my entire life, no matter how long I apply for, based off the current structure. So,
which doesn't hurt as bad if it's a random draw and you just know it's really terrible odds and you're probably not going to get it.
Correct.
It hurts way worse if it's a preference draw and they literally say, we're not even going to look at your application until you have 60 points.
You're not even in it. Yeah. So when you look at the different changes they're proposing, I mean, they've looked at a 50-50, more like Utah and Arizona. I'll be honest, that's going to be a huge change if they go to something like that, because the way you said, well, they could have drawn that sheep tag in Wyoming and it got jerked away from them. Just imagine if you're that guy sitting up there with 33 points.
I'm over 20.
Well, you're over 20.
And I'm at risk for both deer and elk in the same capacity.
Yeah.
They make this change overnight. 80% of the units I could guarantee myself to draw would be gone.
Gone. Yep.
Yeah.
So if you're sitting there looking at it, now is the time realistically, and I'm not saying they're going to make this change next year, but they could change this, they could say they're going to make this change and then implement it strategically. Who knows? There might be a buffer, like Wyoming had a buffer where they gave you a 2-year to burn your points. But all I'm saying is, man, you got to keep up to date on some of these changes and some of these things that these states are doing, because you don't want to be the guy that sneaks up on you. You could draw 201 right now. Gone.
And they don't have to apologize.
No, they don't.
It's called the golden rule.
Yeah.
He who has the gold makes the rules. All right. Move to Nevada here real quick. We use this one as an illustration because Nevada does square your bonus points like Montana does as well. So, if I'm applying for 10 years, I have 10 points. I go in 101 chances effectively. Does it matter, right? The truth of the matter is, when the applicant tag ratios are greater than 50-1, it really doesn't matter. You can see in this graph on the far bottom left here, even with 28 points. And again, let's keep in mind, that's 28 years of building points. Your odds of drawing that, 111 to 115 elk tag in Nevada are still only 7%. Now, when the ratios are lower than that, as is the case with a lot of Nevada's archery deer units, for example, you get to 12 points, you're at 46%. So it rewards long-term behavior if and only if there's enough tags to kind of clear the demand out a little bit over time.
And for all you optimists out there, like hunters are, 7% isn't good. because you got a 93% chance of not drawing.
So
But
you're saying there's a
I'm
chance?
just saying, only hunters look at 7% and be like, God, that ain't bad.
I know. I love that about us. I'll take those odds.
Yeah.
But yeah, point being, those squared points and bonus points in general can be very risky to get attached to because they tend to not make much difference when they're in super high demand units with low quantity of tags being issued. So make sure if you're playing the game that you understand what it looks like.
Yeah.
And again, to be clear, we play this game.
Oh, yeah. We're deeply entrenched in it.
I'm not going to walk away from it.
Yep.
Because you can't draw at all if you're not in it, but you have to be I guess, aware of the risk.
Yeah.
All right, Garth, go ahead.
So Arizona is one of the, in my opinion, one of the more simpler states. It is a blended draw where they have a bonus point system, but in that 20% that goes to the preference draw, we're looking at 5%. So overall, non-reds get a 10% quota. 5% can be drawn in that 20% preference draw. The other 5% can be drawn in the random draw. The reason I say can is because it's not guaranteed. Now, usually there's enough non-residents that apply, you're going to hit that quota, but it's important to note that only 5% of those. So if you're looking at a unit that has, let's say 30 tags, now you cut that down to your 10%. What's that? Well, let's do a better.
3 tags.
3 tags. 2 of those tags will go in the random and 1 will go in the preference. So they err on the side of random. But that being said, just pay attention to that. It's like if you're applying as a party, you're drawing dead unless you get drawn on the random. You could have all the points to be the maximum point holders in that group, but because you applied as a party and there's only 1 tag in that preference draw, you're not getting it.
Thank you for the donation.
Yeah. But the good thing about Arizona is they do have some options out there, which is nice because anyone that's tried to draw like the strip, the Kaibab, some of those units over there, 3A, 3C for rifle mule deer, it's a steep uphill climb. Like there's a chance that you might not catch those. They'll just keep ahead of you, at least in the preference draw. But for Coues deer, by hell, you can go on a Coues deer hunt every few years. They have some awesome late archery elk hunts that people take advantage of every year. There's a lot of those late rifle elk hunts that kind of stay stagnant at 8 to 10 points, you know? So those are some nice options for you that can get you out of that rut where you're just like, man, I'm chasing down archery elk in 5B and it's 20 points now.
Plus, it's a great place to go in January and chase some javelinas around with
100%.
your t-shirt on with your bow. And
Yep.
So you already have the non-resident hunting license if you're in the draw and applying. It's a great state to apply for.
There's at least options there.
Right. Yeah, you're not drawing dead the whole time.
Right.
Oh, Montana. Here we go. We started at the top. I talked about the fact that the preference point gets purged, whereas the bonus points do not. I am not going to go through this flow chart in detail here on tonight's presentation. I would suggest you pause it, digest it. The truth of the matter is the draw happens simultaneously for the combo licenses, which is what the minimum requirement is to hunt in Montana for big game, deer, elk specifically. And then if you're lucky enough to get that tag, you are immediately and kind of behind the scenes placed into your limited entry draw. And so you have to understand that when you apply in Montana, you're trying to get a base tag for what we call a combo tag, or what Montana calls a combo tag. And then you're hoping that simultaneously you can put in for this limited entry draw as well and get a special tag. Won't go into the details beyond that. I'll just say this. We say use it or lose it on this slide for a reason as it relates to the preference point. If you buy the $100 preference point, say in 2023, let's say I bought one last year, which I did. Actually, I'm going to use myself as an example. I donated $100 to Montana this year because I bought the preference point last year thinking that I would draw this year or would apply this year. I ended up having some other hunt opportunities come up. I can't hunt Montana this year. So they're going to keep my $100, purge my preference point, and I'm back to ground zero. Thank you, Montana.
Well, the
Now,
good news
having
is you
said
can
that-
buy another point.
Yeah, thanks, Montana. I will. I will buy a preference point again because I do try to keep that on deck. The good news is the bonus points that I've accumulated over the years, they stay forever.
Yeah.
So Montana's an interesting state. Don't get lost in the weeds. If you have questions, call us. We can help you through that. We love helping people understand their options.
And Utah. So Utah's another blended state. It's very similar to Arizona. The only different, well, the one big difference is Arizona does 80% to random and 20% to preference. Utah's 50-50. The difference is like in that 3 tag scenario I talked about in Arizona, it'll go 2 tags in the preference and 1 tag in the random. So they are on the side of the preference draw. But the important thing to note on this is for all your limited entry species, which we have listed up there under the bonus points, that's the blended draw where it's okay, 50% of those tags go to the top point holders, and those bonus points act as preference points. The other 50% that don't draw on the preference then get kicked into a random draw. And now they have extra chances for all those points in that random draw. So then they act as bonus points. And that's for all those species you see right there. But once it comes to those species down there on the preference points, it's a true preference draw. If you have the highest number of points, you're going to get the tag. If you don't, you won't.
Yeah, again, it's top down.
Yeah, top down. So that's the important thing to note when you're applying in Utah and looking at these different opportunities here is just know where you're sitting at. If you have general deer points and you're looking at, you have 4 points and you're looking at units that take 6 to 7, you're not going to draw those.
Yeah, period.
I mean, at least the other ones you have a chance.
Now I will pause here and say that in Montana, I kind of skipped past it. We highly recommend chasing tags in Montana. It's still a really good value, etc. So I didn't want to go past that. Whereas in Utah, we get a little more dicey about whether or not you should be spending your money here. As you can see, the $16 per app to apply or build points is pretty cheap. The non-resident hunting license is $120. Yeah, $120 on top of that. But those bonus point tags are so limited that it's really hard for us to encourage people to start into that. Having said that, that general mule deer preference draw is still pretty desirable. If you're a passionate mule deer hunter, Utah's worth a shot at chasing some mule deer around.
And it's one of those states that if you're already diving in and you're trying to draw general, it's only $16 more.
Then add those uphill ones.
Don't put in for points.
Yes.
Always apply for those because they're so hard to draw. If you get one, consider yourself lucky, go on an incredible hunt. They're all good hunts.
Build a hole in your schedule.
100%.
Yep.
So this is one of those states where we never recommend to people just build points, except general.
100%.
Yep.
Okay. Friendly reminder to keep putting those Q&A questions in the box at the bottom. We'll cover some of those later. But now we're going to move into point creep. What does it mean? Can you really catch it? This is a really depressing statistic we're going to drop out here. As you can see, and this is true data for right now, it would take 42 years to clear out the current pool of 15 plus. So that's these guys right down over here. It's going to take, at the number of tags being allocated, it will take 42 years to clear these guys out of your way. So if you're sitting here at 14 or less and waiting for this to go away, I'm 52, I'd be 94.
Yeah. No.
In other words, don't count on it.
It is a depressing fact. I mean, that is the one thing you got to look at is just remember when you come in and you're like, man, I got a ton of points. I've been applying here for 14 years, 15 years. You do have a lot of points. You have been playing the game for a long time, but just remember how many other people are playing that same game you're playing.
In this case, 32,000 to be exact.
Yeah. And it's not meant to be discouraging, honestly. It's just meant to be informative.
No, because you got to keep in mind that both this 5,317 and the 32,021 are eligible for this number, right? The bonus permits is what we're saying is depressing.
Well, that's the total permits. So take those 125 out. But
283 minus 125. Everybody is in for those.
Correct.
You do have a shot.
You got a chance.
And that's why, again, we say don't ever build points only in these kind of states.
Absolutely.
All right.
So this is another further illustration of how point creep can reach up and get you. So for instance, like when we talked earlier about don't look at your points as if I'm burning less, that it's a waste. That's a buck that I took last year on in Arizona, and I had 21 points and put in for a hunt that the prior year had taken 15 to draw. Now, in this situation for that 12A West early rifle hunt, this is a little bit of an oddity in the fact that it went from 15 points to 19 points in 1 year. But understand that there was certain criteria that had been hit. Like they had been managing that unit pretty conservatively. The mature buck population had been on the rise the last 10 years. Oh, by the way, they had set those season dates back 7 days later. So now that early hunt went into November. Yep. So there was a lot of different factors that went into that 15 to 19 point jump. But here's the biggest thing that I take away from that. When you see here at the bottom where it says 20 points, 6 applicants with 20 points. There was 12 applicants with 19 points. Well, only 2 out of those 8 drew at 19 points. So there's going to be substantial carryover. And once it hits this level, there's not going to be much of a reduction.
If any.
If any. So you're going to see, again.
What you mean by that is each year that's going to go up a point at a time at a minimum.
Correct.
So you're not going to, any longer you will not be able to catch it.
Right.
Is usually what that means.
That's the tough part about looking at this graph is if you're sitting there at 17 and you could have drawn it the year before, well, guess what? That just jumped past you. And there's a decent likelihood, unless that quality comes off to the point to where people quit applying, excuse me, you might not catch up to that preference draw. You're still in for some random tags, but it's a pretty sombering thing to look at that and be like, oh man, I could have had it. Now that chances just went poof. But I mean, honestly,
but again, that would be another case of hunting the year, not the unit necessarily, because that unit in particular is subject to drought conditions and the things that happen as a result of a drought. So it'd be a great example of, hey, the moisture was coming on. Should have jumped in as soon as you saw that.
Yeah.
Instead of waiting until it's too late and then everybody thinks it's worth more.
As soon as you've seen those season dates set back, 7 days later, that's gonna, make that hunt that much better.
Yep.
That's hunting the year.
Yep.
Jump in when the timing's right.
Love it. Okay. This one's even more depressing.
Yeah, gosh, this is a tough one. When you look at that, I mean, certainly for that guy, it wasn't. He played the game. He won a tag. He shot an awesome ram. But like, just take this for instance. We had an applicant that had 29 points going into the draw this year, and most people would say 29 points. Holy crap! Like, that's a pile. You're gonna draw pretty quick. Well, the reality sets in that there was 852 applicants that were applying with greater than 29 points. So at the rate of distribution with 30 tags being issued in the bonus pass every year, like you can see right there, that's going to be 28.
That's total for all sheep.
Correct.
Yep.
For all sheep,
in Arizona.
So now you're looking at 28 more years before that guy at 29 is going to be in the max point draw.
My bad.
So just digest that. The only saving grace in
The part I like is that'll also equate to 55 bonus points.
Now, just swallow that for a minute. We're looking at it at 30 something points now.
Thinking it's ancient.
55 looks different.
Yeah.
That's a different number. But what I was going to say is the only decent thing about this for non-residents, I would say on average, 90+% of the non-resident tags are issued in the random draw.
Yeah.
So you have a chance. It doesn't mean you're never going to catch up and draw that tag. Again, Arizona's another state. If you're applying and you're going on coos deer hunts every few years, or you're targeting that elk hunt in 8-10 years on that late rifle, put in for a sheep.
Yeah.
Because you have a shot and you never know when your name's going to be called. And it's another donation. Look at it as a raffle, no extra application fee. And next thing you know, you're like that guy that we drew for New Mexico this year.
Yeah.
Picked up the phone, just started applying this year for New Mexico, drew a bighorn sheep tag. So you just never know.
Yep. Nope. You can't draw if you're not in. We do know that. Okay. All right. Change the game. We'll run through some of this at a fairly high level here. Yep. Garth's already alluded to this several times. We do say the only constant in this game is change. Several states are contemplating point system abolishment entirely. Point system modifications, modifications where, like in the state of Wyoming, where maybe your preference points actually do behave a little bit like bonus points because they realize they're losing interest left and right because of the way they've crafted the system. Non-resident quota adjustments, which almost never go in a non-resident's favor.
Haven't yet.
Pretty much none. Extreme price increases, trophy quality adjustments, weather cycles, you name it. So again, it's important to just kind of stay at the front of it and recognize that I hate to say this, but it's probably not going to be better next year than it was last year, is what this is kind of pointing to.
It usually isn't. I mean, I'm hopeful because I mean, one of the things on Colorado's draw options right now is just going to a flat 75-25.
Mhm.
Residents hate it.
I love it.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that might err in the side because right now there's a portion of those that are 80-20.
Yeah.
That would be the first time in history that I can remember.
At least 10 years.
Yeah, when it went in our favor. But remember that just 2 years ago, or no, just this year, they instituted that. They went from 65%, 35% to 75-25. So they took 10% away from
But
non-residents
they might
this
come
year.
back with 5.
Little bit.
Yeah. No, it's important to note that it's probably not going the best direction, and that opportunities today are probably going to be better than points tomorrow.
Yeah. Man, and that's
Speaking of which,
that's why we always say, like, it's not in your best interest to just gain points. Like, you're missing out on so many good opportunities. And all too often, I think, especially in this game, and realistically, when Huntin' Full started, it was all about trophy. It was all about trophy quality. But remember, when Huntin' Full started, they were at pretty much the ground level at a lot of these point systems. If you got in at that time frame, you were going to get on some incredible hunts. You were going to get a sheep tag. You were going to draw the Henry Mountains. You were going to pretty much have your pick at a lot of these. That's not the same case right now. So by all means, there's so many awesome opportunities out there to get out with your family, friends, explore, cover country, have a great time. There's still tons of opportunity out there, but you can't get hung up on the, I'm never going to draw this tag. This hunting is way worse now than it is. The populations are down. There's like every year I still
miss out on awesome opportunity, awesome memories.
Well, we talked about this the other day. We were mentioning that, man, there's so many different states that we built points up in. And yet every single year we find ourselves gravitating back to general hunts.
Yeah.
Because sometimes those are the funnest.
Yep. No, you can have great camps, great opportunities. More people can join if you want it to be a bigger camp, etc.
Yep.
I think one thing that I would stress here is this bullet point where we say, think about where you may move someday to retire or be closer to family. More and more of the country is becoming a little bit more mobile. I mean, we're so virtual these days that more people are like, hey, I might move from Georgia to Nevada or whatever else.
Yeah.
If there's any of that kind of notion in your head, you should be building points in those states right now for sure. Because when you do land there as a resident, they do give residents extreme preferential treatment. And it's definitely a strategy where we would actually recommend that you build and hang on to points in that case.
And I will say, we'll preface that on the current structure.
True.
Because we are seeing shift. I mean, every year we're seeing shift in certain states' draws where it's like, wow, that guy was not there last year. How all of a sudden is there a resident with 28 points?
Mm-hmm.
He moved there.
Yep. And then they don't like that.
No, then they don't.
Okay. With that, let's dive into some Q&A. I will say that as always, here at Huntin' Fool, you already have this digital membership included as an onX Elite member. All you have to do is activate that. Super easy to do so. A couple clicks, you're good to go. You get 1,500 pages of content for the eMag that people like Garth Jensen crank out every year to get you on more hunts with better information, etc. And then we also offer a discount on all other membership types, including one-on-ones, where you can call and talk to somebody like Garth and our other talented team of hunt consultants, etc. So love to have you participate in that. With that said, we'll get out of your way. Dylan?
Awesome. Yeah, we've got some good questions, a few from before, and if you want to stop sharing that presentation, we can dive into them. Just I'll ask some questions and we can kind of field them as they come up. So first one, I think you guys just answered this one. So if you have a non-resident, or if you are a non-resident and have points and move to that state, they do carry over, correct? I know you just answered that, but is that true for all Western states?
Everyone that I can think of, I mean, you're going to lose them in Wyoming for elk, deer, and antelope, obviously, because Wyoming doesn't have a point system for residents for elk, deer, and antelope. But to my knowledge, yet. But I think all the rest of them pretty much transfer over. Some of them have some different nuances. Like I know that Nevada's been a little bit sticky and you got to jump through some hoops to do that. But it seems like that they will still carry over as long as you play by the rules.
Yep. And we would make a strong recommendation there, though, that if you do make the move, sit out of the draw for at least a full year, even if your residency takes over in 6 months. Like, we have seen some people stung who had great intentions and for all intents and purposes looked like they were checking all the boxes. Sit out a year, make sure that when you come back in with all those points in the resident draw, that nobody can call into question the right of your residency.
Yep.
Dylan, is the
And,
screen not showing now? You're good now?
So down at the bottom, you should see screen share and it should let you stop. We're still seeing the presentation, but not a big deal. There we go. Perfect. Question, kind of a additional add-on question to that one. I know is every state a little bit different to where you have to be a resident for X number of months to be a resident, quote unquote, in that state?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would say that different states, I would look into the local regulation.
It's 6 months minimum. I don't know a single state that doesn't require at least 6 months. And then like Alaska, I know for a fact is at least a year.
Yeah.
And they take a pretty hard look at what qualifies you as a resident. Again, we will not go out on a limb here. We would just tell you, you absolutely owe it to yourself and your hunting future to make sure that you are in compliance with the state regulations.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's 6 months to a year minimum.
Yep.
And you cannot be a resident of 2 states. We get that all the time. I don't understand that question, but you cannot be a resident in more than 1 state, period, for any hunting in any state in the entire United States.
Makes sense. I did forget the giveaway, so we will post a link in the chat to the giveaway. Folks at Huntful are going to give away 5 free consultations like we do on these webinars. So check the link below in the chat, get signed up. It'll take 2 seconds. It's quick and painless. And if you win one of those 5, you can give these folks a call and pick their brain a little bit more extensively on, hey, I've got this number of points. Here's what I'm looking at doing. What would you recommend? So I know I use that feature a lot, probably too often, but it's super helpful. So get signed up for that.
Red flag for sure.
Yeah, I know. I called during application season and they probably groan, but a few more questions here. So do the states warn you before they purge your points, or do they just purge them to 0?
Most, I think, will purge them. I mean, I think some of them, like Wyoming, will actually send out an email reminding you, but I would definitely not count on that. Like you need to be on that. I think most states are not going to send out a reminder and say, hey, your points are in danger or in jeopardy of being purged. You got to get on it. Do you know of any that
they absolutely do not, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
It's awful, to be honest. And we have a lot of mistakes in Wyoming in particular, Dylan. Again, keep in mind, A, it purges after 2 years. So it's one of the most egregious states out there. And B, they will not allow you to build your preference points during the draw itself. You have to do that in the points only period afterwards. We have tons of people who every single year, I applied in the draw, so I built my points. Like, no, you didn't. You did not, and you will. Don't miss your points period because it is separate.
I will say this: anyone that applies for Nevada, when you're getting your license.
Yeah, they talk about it a lot.
They will send you about 5 emails reminding you that you're on auto renew and you're going to get charged.
Yep.
Awesome. Let's see which one to go with here.
Hey, Dylan, I
think
got one here I would answer.
Go ahead.
John here says, I've been buying the bonus points in Montana for the past 5 years. I was told that they might help with getting drawn. Is that true? 2 things here. One, yes, Montana does square your bonus points, which does give you an increased mathematical advantage. It really depends on the species. If you're talking about deer or moose, sheep, or goat, there's so few tags issued in the really quality opportunities that the answer is it's minimal help. If you're talking about elk and more specifically archery elk, then yes, 5 points gets you a long ways toward almost punching your ticket for most of the hunts in the state with a bow.
Definitely. Another one here. So I had 3 points, two weighted as a resident when I applied for 2024 Colorado goat tag. Basically saying didn't think there's any chance in heck I would get it, but he was successful with the goat tag. How in the heck did that happen so early on?
Random.
Well, that's the point we're making,
Yeah.
is that when
Yeah.
once you get your 3 points and you actually get your name in the hat, the difference between having 15 extra points and 0 extra points beyond that is so minuscule that it's truly like a random draw.
And that's what we see all the time. We'll see people from across the board from 17 points to, like you say, 0 points, draw those tags to the extent to where, yeah, case in point, pretty much a random draw.
Mhm.
Another individual, I was surprised to draw Montana elk combo. We had 1.5 point party average. Does this jive with what you've saw? It seems that non-resident demand may have drastically dropped.
So it's funny because we've had those ones where you pull up your results and it'll say unsuccessful combo, general big game combo, successful, general big game combo. But then next to that, what is that little phrase it has in parentheses? There's a little phrase there next to it. But it's because those recycled tags, or those like we had on that diagram, everyone that drew their general and didn't draw their limited and opted for a refund, those licenses then kick back in and they recycle that, and then you got drawn on a recycle tag.
Yep. And to be a little more clear on that, you have a couple of options when you apply as a non-resident for a combination license of any kind, whether that be deer, elk, or the big game combo, which is both. There's a box you can check that says, if I'm unsuccessful in my limited entry drawing, please refund my tag immediately. And so that tag goes right back into the draw, like Garth was pointing out. We typically recommend that you do not check that box. To be clear, leave that box unchecked. You can send that tag back to Montana, clear up till August 1, and get the same amount of refund that you would if you checked the box and said, refund me immediately. So it gives you an ace in the hole. It gives you a tag in your pocket if you have it and you don't draw the limited entry. Keep the tag, return it before August 1 if you want to get rid of it. But it does create weird nuance in the draw where people are going, what's going on with these draw results?
Did I draw or did I not draw?
Yeah.
Got a couple more good ones on my end here. This one said, my buddies apply for Wyoming each year and have an average of about 5 points for deer. Are we wasting our time on low demand hunts? Also, we're 60 years old.
Well, he has options. I mean, that's the thing, is they do have options. It's pretty much going to be in the form of general regions. Right now, as we kind of outlined, deer in Wyoming are not doing the greatest timing. It's just kind of bad timing right now. So yeah, you have options. I don't know if I'd be wasting your time. That's to the point, like if I was having a consultation with them, I would ask them what warrants waste of time? Like, what does that dynamic look like? Is it, if I go up there and see anything less than a 160, it's a waste of my time? You might be wasting your time right now. But if it's like, man, I'm just looking for a decent hunt with my buddies to go out, possibly have the opportunity to find a few bucks, we're not really too hung up on trophy quality. No, there's options. You know, it's not a complete waste of your time. So yeah, I would just say that depending on what their parameters are for their hunt, it's going to dictate that.
Yeah, Wyoming's still a pretty good value when it comes to building points. They're top 3 in our mind, even though they've kind of made some of the most egregious changes in the last couple of years. They're still kind of top 3 when we talk to people, including the deer. And then to Garth's point, you know, what experience are you looking for, and how many inches of antler, and are the two directly correlated or not? There's a lot of deer tags going to be issued in Wyoming, and you can have a lot of fun hunting deer in Wyoming.
Absolutely. But again, timing.
Now, one thing to remember, timing. One thing to remember, again, 75-25 tag allocation. You got to remember, if you're in a unit that does not have, or a region that does not have very many tags, you got to be careful about whether or not you're drawing dead, just not any tags at all.
Yeah, and we outline that. I mean, it outlines it in the draw, it's for sure.
Yep. Some units do not have any random tags at all.
Awesome. I got 2 more, unless you guys have any on your end. What are the chances of Idaho going to a point system? As a non-resident trying to draw an elk tag, it's about impossible to plan a group hunt in Idaho with the current system.
I would say 0.
I would say 0. And honestly, I would encourage that. Now, what is going to happen, we're pretty certain, is that all of the general tags that currently go on sale December 1 of the previous year at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, it's been an absolute cluster. We've talked about it till we're blue in the face. It's been fastest click wins. Actually, not even fastest click. It's just whatever luck you get in the shopping cart. We do believe that's going to go to a draw. And in that case, then you could actually follow the party protocol. And therefore it's one tie, all tie. If one of you gets a tag, y'all get a tag, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we believe is the most egregious about the current system is that you eliminate the ability to be a party hunt group in the state of Idaho. So we think that's going to go away. Probably not for 2025. Probably December 1, I think we're still going to see the old system. We're hoping that it won't be, but it is going to go away, we think.
Yeah, but I don't envision point system at all.
No, absolutely not. Idaho has entertained it multiple times over the last decade and more. And I believe the last kind of verdict was no points ever.
Every time they turn around and look at the states around them that have point systems, they can see 100 different reasons not to.
The evidence is there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Last one I got here. Are there any major changes to Colorado and Utah that might warrant burning points sooner rather than later? Anything additional? I know we covered a couple in the slides, but
I don't think Utah has any changes on deck that would warrant burning your points. I mean, if there was any positive about Utah at all, it's the fact that they are getting more aggressive with predator management, which stands to do some good for the mule deer herd here. Which is going to open up more opportunities, so it might even get better. Colorado, on the other hand, possibly. I know that draw has passed, so there's little we can do without that now. But realistically, those committees that have been put in place of going for the next 5-year season structure, depending on how that rolls out, that might be encouraging if they move those season structures closer, or more out of the rut for mule deer. We might see a better age class come around, and so maybe that's more encouraging for future. But if we're looking at draw changes in there and they go from 100% preference to 50-50 preference and random, man, yeah, that's something to definitely take note of. I mean, even in those meetings, I will say this: the game and fish gal that was on there said we can't institute that in 1 year. So if we made that big of a change, it would take a multi-year cycle to get into that. So even if they make the change, I think there's going to be a buffer period where if you need to burn those points, you can. But yeah, if they go to that
There's
change,
likely to be a fair amount of other people panicked into burning them then too,
yes,
which creates those artificial bumps.
Correct.
Times.
Yep,
Yeah.
You're right. So maybe in Colorado, it's something to keep your finger on the pulse of and see what comes down the pipe.
awesome. Good stuff. Any questions on your guys' end, Jared?
There's one at the top here. I have 6 elk preference points as a non-resident in Colorado. He specifies later, what should my app strategy be to get the best quality hunt and bull opportunities? Private land, ? By the way, I'm 69 years old, great shape, but accumulating points isn't in my future.
Yeah.
When you get to 6 points in Colorado for elk, you're at a point where, to be honest, most of us would say burn them.
Burn them. Yeah, because the reality is you're probably not going to catch up to a hunt that you could already draw at this point. And
correct.
So burning them, going on the best hunt you can get, which there's options. There's tons of options. People think that, you have to have 15 or 20 points to get options in Colorado. That's not true.
Not even true.
There's still some good options for 6 points, regardless of the weapon. So yeah, I would say burn them, find the best hunt you can go on that hunt and enjoy it.
And since he mentioned private land in particular, I assume that guided is not out of the question. Man, give us a call. Huntin' Full Adventures over here. We book tons of hunts. It's what we do. It's what we specialize in. Matching your expectations, your point portfolio, etc., with the hunt outcome. Give us a call. I think that's the best bet for that one. You don't have to be a member to call Huntin' Full Adventures. Just call in, get a consultation. And then
Awesome.
I think I had
And
one
yeah,
more. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just about to say that's helpful information for me because I believe I will have 6 points for elk next year in Colorado. So yeah, you answered a question of
Buddy, we
mine
got some options for you.
preemptively.
Yeah, at this point, Garth made this analogy earlier for those of us stuck with the entire presentation, that people who currently have 15, 16, 18 points in Colorado for deer could have gone on 3 to 4 to 6 hunts that were really quality, similar to what it would take them to earn today. You're kind of in the same boat with elk right now, where if you're at 6 points in Colorado, you're not going to climb to many more levels, at least at the way the points work right now. So go would be our advice.
Yeah.
Mike says, so I'm late to this game. I'm 60, moved to Colorado in 2013, been building points here and hunting every year here. Is it too late to start trying for the other states? No, it's not. Again, though, if I was going to rank them, I would say Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana. Particularly if you're an archery hunter, archery elk, Montana's kind of a no-brainer in there too. All three of those don't cost a lot of money to build points in. They have plenty of tags being allocated to get opportunities. At a minimum, I would be at almost any age, I would be considering those. If I was a passionate hunter who wanted to get out of my home state and go make some memories in a new horizon.
Yeah, and if you had any extra income, like we've talked about the random states here, we haven't mentioned them much because this was a more or less dealing with points. But New Mexico, just south of you, I mean, we just come out the draw results. Someone's going to get those tags, and everyone's on the same footing when you go into that. So, yeah, if you got a little extra, I mean, even if you want to hunt deer, hell, like we talked about in Arizona, there's tons of coos deer opportunity down there. And if you hunt with a bow, you can do it every year.
One other good question here. My son and his father-in-law hunt in Idaho as residents. Could I, as a Colorado resident, join them on a group hunt application? The answer across the board is pretty much yes. The bad news is it defaults them to non-resident status.
Yes.
And that's pretty much true in every Western state that I'm aware of. The minute you add a non-resident to your group application, you go into the 10% pool or whatever the limited quota of opportunity for non-residents is. So the answer is yes, but it costs the residents a lot.
Yeah, the nuances are a little tricky because they're still pulling the residents out of that pool, but because you're on a group application, everybody has to draw.
Yep.
And if the non-resident doesn't, you're not drawn.
Yep, you're gone. So it hurts the odds for the resident drastically across the board.
Well, unless you guys
There's
have
more, but if,
any additional ones on your end, or are you all good?
No, I would say this. There's quite a few questions in the chat that in my opinion, need an actual hunt consultation. Again, we're going to give 5 of those away randomly in this particular webinar. And then in general, there's been questions like, what does it cost, etc. A one-on-one membership for an onX member, an elite member is, I think, $85. And I'll use the term unlimited. Garth, I'm throwing you under the bus here, buddy.
yeah, that's all
But
right.
it is. It gives you a year's worth of consultations, and all of these kinds of questions are what we do every single day. So I highly encourage you to call up our customer service team and see if membership is right for you. You won't get a high pressure pitch. We only want you to do it if we can help you get on more hunts.
Yep.
Yeah, and as you know, from my perspective, that $85 or whatever that cost is, to know that I'm spending all of my other money more effectively and efficiently with a plan is a no-brainer. I mean, there's hundreds and thousands of dollars that go into this game, as you guys say we play, and to know that I'm doing, the most efficient route for my specific goals is well worth that price of admission. So I would urge everybody to try it out for sure. But I appreciate your guys' time. Thank you, everybody who stuck with us tonight, and looking forward to the next one.
Awesome. No, thank you guys so much for the opportunity.
Love it.